July 9th, 7 o'clock, July 9th, 2019. This is officially our 11th anniversary as a city. We started July 8th, 2008. And so the first meeting in July is always when we celebrate anniversary. So happy birthday to the city of Now Then. And congratulate us all on becoming a maturing city now. So
Almost a teenager. 2 more years.
Yeah,
yeah, 2 more years and then we're in trouble. So
to the terrible teens.
I would also like to take an opportunity at the start of this meeting to recognize the passing of Harlan Meyer. Harlan Meyer was a resident of our city, moved in around 2007, if I recall, and remodeled the farmhouse over on Jasper. He and his wife Joyce did a wonderful job in restoring that house. And Harlan was elected to the very first city council in Now Then back in 2008 election. So he would have started July 8th, served for 6.5 years on the city council. He was part of our planning and zoning commission, and he supported the city in many ways, even when he was no longer on the council. He was always active in the Heritage Festival. He and his wife participated in the farmers market on a regular basis. Very supportive of city activities, very supportive of family activities. An admirable character in many, many ways. And so we are grateful to have had his service here as a city in so many ways. Our condolences to his wife and his family. And so I would like to take this time to recognize him and say that personally and as a city, he will be greatly missed. All right, so if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we can forego the meeting policy tonight since there's no one in the audience to hear it. And online it's not going to matter because you're not here in person to participate. And we will move to the approval or amending of the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. You'll have to remind us of that. That's
okay. Mayor Jeff Pilon,
here.
Councilmember Mary Rainville,
Here.
Councilmember Linda Blake,
Here.
Councilmember Dan Bryan,
Here.
Councilmember Joel Greenberg.
Here.
And note that we also have Planner Stockman and Sergeant, I'm sorry. All right, so now we'll move on to the agenda. And if you could, for future agendas, put roll call.
Yep.
Then I won't miss these. Thank you. Agenda. We do have an addition here, updating the resolution 2019. Do we know the resolution number? 53. We have an updated version of that to add to our packet. Anything else needs amending tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
motion to approve the agenda as written.
All right.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sergeant, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am Sergeant Josh Patton, I'm from the Sheriff's Office, filling in for Commander Wayne Heath. Busy month in Now Then, so calls for service for the month of Now Then were 184. There was 20 traffic arrests, 5 DUIs, 5 misdemeanor arrests. Those are your big ones. Other calls for service to bar none this month were 11. Had 18 medicals throughout the city. Numbers are steadily climbing, it appears. Year to date, Last year at this date, there were 667 calls for service in the city of Nowland. This year, so far, 913 calls for service in the city.
Wow.
With the other calls for additional reporting calls, which are like your bar run facilities, animal complaints, stuff like that. Last year, this time there was 47. This year, to date, there's 159 calls. So there's an increase in calls for service so far this year, obviously. Bar None has been a little bit more active recently. I don't know if it's just the group of residents they have in there at the current time or what, but they have been a little bit more active over the past few weeks, month and a half, with calls for service. That's all I got. Unless you have any questions?
We do have a meeting planned with Bar None.
Okay.
Do you remember what the date is?
It's Wednesday, 10, I believe.
Should I get that on my list? Actually, I've got it for the 24th.
2 weeks away.
Yep. So we have a meeting with the Bar None officials on the 24th, so
Okay.
that's been one. I think another increase we're seeing obviously is medicals. We're seeing that on the
Yes.
fire side as well, so.
Yep, yeah, medicals have increased. Well, last month in May, there was 5, and in June there's 18. So I don't know if that has to do with more people are like visiting the park, Twin Lakes Park, or it's just the heat, weather coming in. Play a part in that as well.
All right, anything from the council? For Sergeant?
Well, Dan and I went and visited Bar None about, what was it, Dan? 2 weeks ago? Oh, a week before last, I think. I don't know. Anyway, from the conversation we had with them, it should seem like there would be less calls. They're treating a less, or treating, or whatever the words are, a less severe group of people than they were before. They were working with, through the criminal justice system, and they're not doing that now. They're taking more families that are falling apart, and children need to be placed somewhere. And so they felt like their calls and their needs would decrease because of that. Are taking younger children now and not as many older. And so a lot of the issues were supposed to kind of de-escalate.
But I can tell you in the month of May, Bar None, they had 0 calls for service. And then last month they had 11. So I don't
Okay.
know if they got a new group of residents in there.
I
or
bet they did.
different
Mhm.
Residents cycling through that were maybe a little bit more than they could handle or not. I don't know that answer. But last month they were quite active.
I do want to have on the record that after the visit to Bar None, I was really impressed with the work they do, because they're taking the throwaway children, so to speak, and they're trying their hardest. It seems like they're very sincere people that are trying, and they're revamping everything so it's less, there was a lot more severe punishments in the way they handled things, and the new person who's come on is working in a whole different way. And I feel like they really have a good work going. And I'm sorry that that we have these issues, but I do feel like the work out there is amazing. They're taking children and trying their best to turn their lives around or give them some sort of semblance of order in their life for the period of time they're there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Oh,
I
good.
think they have a very tough job. And
Yes.
I think that they do the best they can with the resources that are allocated to them, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
I'm proud of now then that we've opened our doors to them. Very proud of that. I think I'm proud of our city, that this is something we felt is a good thing.
Well, actually, we always thought they were in Oak Grove, so.
Oh, well, I'm prouder now than anyway.
No, it's something that we do need to figure out, you know, what we can do. We've always been impressed by what they're attempting to do there. It's just the gaps in the 0 to 11 is, and sometimes, as the sheriff's department will tell you, some of those are pretty severe calls that go out there.
Well, they're hoping they won't be as severe, but I don't know. I mean, this last month, I don't know how severe the calls were, but they're hoping they're not gonna be as severe as they were in the
We have to
past.
make sure, because the residents that live there, it does become a concern.
That's right, and they're trying hard, that's why I think they changed their interest in who they are going to work
Yeah, you
with.
just don't, you go out to your own garage, you don't want surprises.
No, well, I certainly
Whether
understand
it's
that.
up there or on Jasper. All right, anything else? For the Sergeant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Brainville?
not to the sergeant, but as far as bar none, with this meeting, I remember when Mediation Services was here, and they talked about working with them. I don't know if they're part of this meeting, or if you've had additional conversations with them at all.
Not to my knowledge, you know, we had, because Commander Heath wasn't able to make that last meeting either, my understanding was, so.
Okay,
We want to have that meeting first to say, what are you attempting to do, and then see what we can resolve
okay, all
there.
right.
So again, that is open to the council. If more than 2 council members want to show up, we need to post it at least 3 days ahead of time. But I do have it on my schedule to be there.
They'll take you on a nice tour too, so you can actually see the facilities and the changes they've made.
We've been on a few tours.
Well, they've just made big changes again.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is until the clients are adjudicated, they can't lock some of the doors, and that becomes the problem. They have 2 types of clients there, some there for legal problems and some there for emotional problems. One they can lock doors on, one they can't. And that becomes
You mean the
issue.
building doors or their room doors?
Both.
But if they're not, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
if they're no longer taking people based on the criminal aspects of what they're involved with and have moved to private pay, do those rules still
I
approve?
don't know what,
Okay,
if it's, the only people that they weren't allowed in the past to lock on was the non-adjudicated.
okay.
People that were sent out there to see if this might be a good
Oh, okay.
situation for them.
Yeah, okay.
So that may have changed, we'll know more on the 24th.
Right.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryant.
they're changing their structure to going away from the DOC to DHS, if that,
Okay.
so
Just a
however
DSA,
that
Okay, so not private.
makes a difference.
Yeah, that would make a difference on doors, typically. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Have a wonderful evening. We appreciate you filling in, and
Thanks.
thanks for not singing.
You're welcome.
You can work on it for next month.
But you should ask Commander Heath if he could give you his version of what he would have sung tonight.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask him to, video
Quick,
record it.
yeah, send it to us.
Thank you. All right, no floor items, consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I move the council approves the consent agenda as provided.
Second?
All right, motion second, any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Planning and zoning, Mayor Stockman.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manson is requesting an interview permit to operate 3 separate businesses. And in working with him on what he does and how long he wants to do it and those kinds of things, it was determined that he's working to kind of phase out everything, sell the place, and kind of move on. So in light of that, he agreed to a 3-year time period attached to the use permit. And because the garage door repair business, for instance, had very few effects outwardly or from an outdoor storage perspective, we lumped that together with the septic system excavation business. In addition, Mr. Madsen's septic system license expires the end of 2019. So you will see
And for clarification, that's black dirt hauling that he already has on there, he's not mining anymore.
No mining, right, he will buy compost and mix that with other things, but, correct, not mining on the site. So, this interviews permit as presented would end on July 31st, 2022. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
To Ms. Stockman, under the decision number 1, or excuse me, number 2, hours of operation, I'm leery on giving him Sunday. We have heard from residents where their neighbors have IUPs or CUPs that basically have a 7-day-a-week ability to perform their services. And there are residents that are wishing we hadn't given them Sundays. Some of them are wishing we hadn't given them Saturdays. So I would ask that we remove the Sunday from that.
Ms. Rainville, even though we had no residents at the public hearing, and it was noted too that Mr. Ranson has been operating for numerous years without a complaint, with all due respect, he is a fair distance from neighbors as opposed to some others, but what do the other council members think?
When I was at the meeting, it sounded like he was quite a ways from the planning and zoning, but he had quite a distance from his neighbors. That's the way it sounded.
Yeah, he's set back quite a way, there's
Yeah.
no ways, there's nobody behind him. The house on the west side is his rental home. The house on the east side is vacant. But there's, I think, 1 or 2 across the street. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it, I just haven't spoken to him about that.
I think that Councilmember Rainville's point that, we've been fairly liberal with IUPs for Sunday. And I do know when you're dealing with things, he may be the exception where he doesn't have that many neighbors. I do know, having some IUPs around me, it's nice to have a day off when you're running diesel trucks. And when they're running Sundays, if you're having company or sitting outside, it's operating a diesel truck. And they diesel a long time, especially in the winter. So I would have no problem just on general practice, unless there's real reason to have a Sunday business, to say, let's delete.
What is
the
his
Sunday.
reason for a Sunday business?
I don't know, some of them just kind of
Leave an option
do it
open.
when they're asked to do it, kind of thing.
Okay.
Not that he's continuously, working all day long or anything, so. Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, I guess.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan?
So the garage door probably isn't going to be an issue on Sundays. He's not really excavating any longer. Septic thing would be off-site. I'm just curious with the black dirt stuff, how is it moving around a lot of trucks, or is it a machinery, or?
No, he doesn't have a lot of business anymore, I mean, it's a load here and a load there, so.
The only thing he'd probably be doing there, other than loading the dirt into a truck or unloading it, is he's bringing dirt in and mixing product on his property. So,
He could, yeah, I know he does, screen it or whatever, kind of, yeah, process it.
typically, you've got your big conveyor system going up in a screen and screening out rocks and gravel.
So is it something that we would kind of redefine or make sure we bring that up during the public hearing, that it get discussed?
Good idea.
Well, I think going forward, yeah, I think if the council thinks that Sundays should be the exception when you're running a business in a residential area, I think that should be something that needs to be discussed in the future at those meetings. There was nothing that said, as I recall from the meeting, it says, I need Sundays too, other than, we generally have said, if you want something, get it now because it's harder to come back later.
Right.
But I don't recall there was any great discussion on Sunday work. So it was just Saturday and Sunday have 8 to 5, so.
Right, so I would think then we would probably want to bring it up as, if we're gonna change our standard to be so at Monday through Saturday, then we almost need to bring it up to go, is it necessary that you're doing things on Sunday? Because I know we've had that discussion in the past with other places
Yep.
about pickup or whatever, but yeah, I just don't remember any conversation that happened regarding it.
No, and my understanding here is Councilmember Rainville just saw it and is bringing it up, and I'm just agreeing that if you're in a residential area, it's nice to have a day off. And I think we should, as part of our practice, in future public hearings, when we're issuing IUPs, make sure the discussion of Sundays is separate from, typical operating hours during the week. I mean, he's got 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., he's got long hours Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
and he's got options on Saturday. But again, it's nice to wind down on Saturday night, if you are entertaining, you at least know it stops at 5 o'clock. But if we as a council think it's important to question the Sunday, we should make sure that's communicated to Planner Stockman and to the planning and zoning going forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockman.
in this case, I would request that we either delay this then, or I could step out and call Mr. Mattson, make sure that's all right with him, since we haven't talked about this previously. I think a lot of times what happens with these contractor types is that, if you get a rainy day on a weekday, sometimes they'll try to catch up on a weekend, or maybe, we have to kind of be careful, because what if he's just working on his own truck that day? Or, you know what I mean, if he's starting it up to work on it versus actually using it. I mean, maybe he's totally fine with it, but just the fact that we haven't talked about it with him.
Why don't you give him a call, see if he's available, and then we can wrap it up tonight.
Okay.
Then I did want to make a note, too, on this resolution on revoking the mining permit. That's actually resolution 2019-53. So the other one is 54. The comprehensive plan should be 54.
And Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
Yeah, I was unable to attend the planning and zoning meeting, and so, yeah, if no one else brought that up, it wasn't brought up. But as a council, we are not obligated to give carte blanche to the decisions made by P&Z. We have the right to make changes to anything in front of us. It would have been better to have it discussed at P&Z, but again, I was not able to attend that meeting.
So, Mr. Mayor, for clarification, are you saying we're going to decide that he can't be open on Sunday? Or are we going to open it up for public discussion for the people? I mean, didn't she say he hasn't had any complaints for 2 years?
He's never had a complaint that has been documented that the city is aware of.
So then, Mary, why did you say that?
Just based on comments from residents, not specific to this, but based on comments from residents about having operations near them that are running 7 days a week.
Okay.
Our
Yeah.
residents, for the
Okay.
most part,
I thought you meant him.
no, work all day, all week long.
Yeah.
Saturday and Sundays, their time to enjoy their home, their property, their activities outside, and having a business that's running 2 days a week, each weekend day is.
I understand now.
infringes
I didn't
on that.
understand.
Yeah, I apologize if I was not clear. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. I just needed to understand.
While she's doing that, can we move along to the council item there? Joe, on the road repair? As she gets back in. All right, so in our previous discussion, and I will say this for the council's sake, so at our last meeting, we agreed that Joe could repair the roads that we went out and visited and leave them in a repaired state without blacktop. And that we would either agree to redo those roads next year in their entirety, or if we didn't do that as a project, we'd come back and blacktop those repaired sections. So on those repairs. And then subsequently, we're gonna have the discussion, is Rogers Lake next year, are these roads next year, what's gonna be happening next year? One of the discussions I had when I was up at the League of Minnesota Cities meeting was one of the cities that has significant debt, and they've decided to get out of debt. And so they're gonna pay off $40 million of debt and not go into debt for any future projects. They're going to put them on capital improvement plans and try and pay as they go. Now, this has been a discussion here in the council previously. We weren't quite sure how to do it. We're going to inquire of that city how they're planning on doing that and having that discussion here. So when I came back, I had a brief conversation with Lori on what we want to do on future bonding with roads, what we want to do on a cash basis, planning, capital improvements. So just to plant the seed, we're going to figure out what it takes going forward to minimize our use of bonds and maximize our use of cash. And so if the council is amenable to that, that's what we would like to direct staff accordingly. Have Lori start looking at that, and I'll work with her and this other mayor and administrator, or city manager, and see what we can do to propose that. That will affect what we might do next year, because we don't have millions of dollars set aside for that. And we have to be careful how much we levy in any given year. So as we come in our budget discussions in the next 2 months, it's one of the things we're gonna wanna talk about is how do we wanna handle future bonding versus future cash? How accurately can we look at our capital improvement plan and levy accordingly? And then take a look at what we're spending on bituminous repair right now, on gravel upkeep, and then redoing of roads. And look at that pool from a capital improvement plan and not just assume we're gonna bond every year. I will commend Lori. She did a tremendous job with everything else that was going on here to try and get all the bonding issues taken care of in time. It was a challenge. The bonding agents and all the people that were on the conference call commended us for our AA plus rating. They said that's unusual for a city our size. We have the borrowing power of Blaine or Coon Rapids. City's much larger than we are. And so we're in a good position that way, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it does something we have to pay off for a long time. So keep that in the back of your mind. We want to have that discussion on how do we go forward minimizing our use of funds.
Good.
And that'll impact what we decide to do next year. With that said, this discussion before us here is either way we go forward, at some point we have to fix these pits where the trees are. And so right now Joe's got an estimate of $44,100 here without the cost of hauling the stumps somewhere. Last time we hauled the stumps here to the city lot. But so we do have money in this year's budget for that. And again, you know, do we fix them and leave them with recycled material on them, or do we fix them and patch them? But that's part of what Joe's gonna want some direction here on. Were you able to get a hold of him, Liz?
Yes, he said he never works on Sunday,
So he's okay with, he's okay with no Sunday then?
so we don't have.
A lot to do for nothing,
Smart
right? A lot
man.
to do about nothing.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll finish up with Joe after that, but so back to the interim use.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
Based on Bonner Stockman's conversation with Mr. Mattson, I move that the council accept findings and decisions for the interim use permit with the change under number 2 of decision, removing Sunday hours.
I seconded.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I move the council approve Resolution 2019-53, which is the revocation of the 1993 mining conditional use permit at 8480 North Lake Road.
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I move that council approve the changes to ordinance 2019-02, which is amending the exterior building material requirements for non-residential uses.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Councilmember Bryan, was that you seconding both?
Yes.
He's quick on the second.
You've got places to go.
Yeah. Proceed.
All right, so Joe's looking for direction on the 3 remaining pits.
Mr. Mayor.
So worst case is we patch everything next year. If we return that, we do our repairs this year and leave them covered with recycle. They're manageable through the winter. And if we don't, depending on what we come up with funding, we can at least blacktop the patches next year. I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Bryan.
No, go ahead. I'm just catching up.
So I'm just saying that depending, originally we were thinking about bonding next year again for a larger project. Depending on what we decide going forward here, we at least have money set aside that we can always blacktop over. So, because one of the questions we had was next year, do we take the 5 roads we didn't do this year, the 5 neighborhoods we didn't do this year? Or do we patch all of those and just blacktop the patches next year and redo Rogers Lake? An option is to do the patches in Rogers Lake again this year, leave them gravel and blacktop next year.
Okay.
So we have 3 options. One, next year, we do the project that we had talked about previously, the 5 neighborhoods plus the overlays on adjoining neighborhoods. And in that case, we were intending on bonding for that. So we would patch the road, we would fix the roads this year, leave them with recycled material on them until next year. Option 2 was we would put our major resources into Rogers Lake, redoing the whole neighborhood and Erkium. And we would patch this year, would fix this year, and overlay or grind and mill and overlay next year in the Rogers Lake area. And then we would come back and do blacktop patches on the repairs we did this year in the other 5 neighborhoods. The third option is we save up the money to do complete projects without bonding, and so what we would do is repair this year the 5 neighborhoods we plan on, the 3 areas of Rogers Lake, and depending on what we have for money, come back and blacktop all of those areas, the 5 neighborhoods and the 3 repairs, next spring on a cash basis. Is that understandable?
It's getting more clear as mud as we go.
Yeah, I don't get this.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bryan.
I think I'm intrigued by the convention and how we can pay for this going forward without having a bond. I totally like the idea of not having to do it. It was just kind of one of those things that I understood, hey, for big projects, you've got to come up with how you're paying your vendors for those 10 years, because the assessments go out the 10 years, and that's kind of how it has to be done. So if there's other ways to do that, great, I'm intrigued and curious to find out more. I thought we were going to put off Rogers Lake till the actual complete reclaim until 2021. And that we were just going to do the projects that were previously identified, whatever were on the list, just to do those, to look at just doing those full repairs, overlays, reclaims, working, to see how that all played out. Now, I'm trying to do the math, that probably is close to, or getting close to $1 million, or if it isn't this year, from our previous estimate, probably will be by next year. So if we're saying $1 million, that's probably going to be, would be a bond. Then we'd theoretically be bonding 3 years in a row, and I'm not sure if that's the approach that we want to take.
That's why we were having this discussion. So at our last meeting, when we talked about getting direction from Joe at the special meeting, we talked about an option, because Rogers Lake has been actively pursuing something to be done in their neighborhood for a long time. And the assumption is there's more support for that than in some of these other neighborhoods. And so going forward, do you want to put your resources where people are asking for it versus where people are saying, we don't need this? And based on some of the feedback we're getting this year, the question we had is, how do we want to approach that? And so we left it open that Joe just fix the roads now. And worst case is, if we decide not to do those 5 neighborhoods, we come back and put a blacktop patch on those repairs. And don't fix the rest of the roads in those neighborhoods. And assuming at that time that we would be bonding one way or the other, we would take the intention to bond and apply it to Rogers Lake. And if we're going to do that, the repairs had to be made in Rogers Lake this year, which is why we had Joe go out and estimate what would it take to repair those 3 pits. So that if we decide to come back here with a bond next year, or we do a feasibility study actually later this summer for Rogers Lake, and we say the Rogers Lake people want this more than other people do, and it's equivalent in project cost, the repairs are done, and we could do the full reclamation on Rogers Lake. If we're gonna do full reclamation, we don't wanna put down a blacktop patch and then just chew it all up again. So we would do the same thing, repair the 3 and put in the reclaim on top, and then, again, worst case, next year, we don't have a bonding project ready, or we don't have the money ready for it. We do have enough money to blacktop everything. The 5 that we already agreed on, and the 3 that we might do in Rogers Lake.
The
So worst,
The
patch,
patch.
all right? If we don't have enough money to reclaim and put down new road bed. So worst case, those patches will be blacktopped by spring. Best case, one of those groups, the 5 we planned on, or the Rogers Lake community, would get reclaimed and relayed. So that's what I'm saying, there's 3 scenarios. One is, there is a big project next year in one of those 2 communities, and the other one just gets patched, or there is no big project next year and everybody just gets patched. So either the 5 originals, or Rogers Lake gets a big project, or everybody gets patched. Would be the 3
And the
possibilities.
patch would be bituminous, would be tar.
Yep.
And would
We
last.
take the material that was put down this year. It would be similar to the Garnett patches that we've been doing for the last 10 years, which have held up extremely well. So Joe puts
So
down.
then those residential areas could be put off for another 5-7 years. I mean, if the road in those areas, in the patch areas, are degrading that bad, conceivably in 5 years, their whole road is gonna be bad.
Conceivably.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake?
We don't have, saving the money to complete the project. That's something you're gonna talk to these other mayors that are doing it to see how that's done, and that's another option.
We don't know enough about it yet. We know it intrigues us and we'd like to go forward to investigate it. We still have time because we haven't done feasibility studies going forward. We have time to investigate that. But at some point here this summer, we have to make a decision. Do we want another bond or not?
Okay.
So we need to do due diligence on, if we're not gonna bond, what are we gonna do and what's the time frame? So we can communicate to the residents. Here's our plan going forward. I don't know how it works. Some of those cities are deciding not to assess as well. They're putting it all on levy. And so they're getting significant levy increases by doing that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
the Rogers Lake area, would that pretty much take up 1 year's worth of road projects?
Absolutely.
Would there be enough money left over to patch those 5 areas?
Yes, because that's in a separate fund.
Okay.
Mr.
But, well, I'm sorry. If we were bonding, certainly it would take up the entire bond.
But
If
we
we're
could
not
do both.
bonding,
We could do Rogers Lake and the 5 patches.
yes.
You have to.
Another scenario, the 5 areas we didn't address this year. If we did those 5 areas, that would probably be 1 year's project.
Yes.
So we gotta kind of
That would
choose.
be equivalent to what we're doing this year. It'd probably be
So then we
$1,250,000
patch
or
Rogers?
more.
Right, so,
Rogers would probably be a little more than that, would be more than that.
so the 3, the pits, were they in the Rogers Lake area? That
Yes.
he's proposing the $40,000 fix? Could that be fixed with the Rogers Lake area all simultaneously?
No, the pits would have to be done beforehand, according to the discussion we've had previously with Road and Bridge.
Okay.
We need time for those to settle out to make sure we've got them. And so you don't want to be doing that while you're in the middle of a road project.
Sure.
You tear the neighborhood up for quite some time. And you aren't sure they're settled out. The idea is to fix them this year so they settle out and we know if we've got them. And then whatever we do next year, we either do a blacktop patch on top of it until we can afford to do the whole neighborhood, or we decide to do the whole neighborhood. And I'm sorry for springing on you here, but it's just something just came up last week at the meeting and you know, I just want to say that either way, we've got the money to put blacktop down on top of the patches we would do, all 8 of them. It appears we'd have the money available in our budget right now.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one more question? So then, I'm a little confused here. So then, we would consider patching Rogers Lake, patching the 5, and then somehow, after you talk to people, figuring out maybe 7 years to save the money to go do one of the projects.
And I don't know how long that would be, no.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan.
regardless of whether we're reclaiming, overlaying the entire road project in those 5 areas, or just replacing the blacktop that we took up to make the repair to the road by next spring, summer, all of those areas would have to have blacktop on them in one way, shape, or form, right?
Correct.
Right. So we've addressed at least the repairs to the other 4 spots, and then this would be the 5th spot in fixing the pits. And I think if we went ahead and at least got that project going, we're at least, then that buys us a little time to know if we're going to, because Joe doesn't like, at least as I understand it, Joe doesn't want to put blacktop on it right away anyway.
Correct.
Because to give it a little
to
time to settle in. So that would give us some time to figure out if this different way of funding would work for us for next year. Or we need more time, and if that's the case, then we should be able to, if we need to blacktop the patches this fall, we still might be able to do that.
This fall or in the spring.
Yeah.
And then depending on what we find out about the optional funding opportunities, we always have the option to consider another bond and finish one of, then we have the discussion, which of the projects? The 5 that we pushed out from this year or Rogers Lake?
Right.
Separate discussion.
Right.
The question is now, we've already given Joe the go-ahead on repairs to the 4 plus finishing the Bison. So that one he's already got the go-ahead on. He's asking now with this guesstimate on cost here, 45 plus hauling, is he got direction to go ahead and make repairs in Rogers Lake without any bituminous this year? What we do from here on out, worst case is we put bituminous on it by next spring. And have a long-term patch while we figure out what to do. Or one case. The other case is we leave it till next spring, and one of these sets of projects gets reclaimed and relayed. And the others get patched.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
as
Jones.
I understood it, of the 5 patches that he had proposed, there was only one that was in the 5 areas that we did not do this year.
That was Bison, and he's gonna complete that one this year.
So then the other 4 areas, being that they were not considered projects, we could just patch those with tar.
Next year,
Next year.
yeah.
So I think, what I'm hearing is we could patch those areas that he's proposed, and then we just considered the 2 big ones for next year, Rogers Lake, or the 5 areas that we put off this year.
Well, the 4 that we're patching this year are in that 5, that group of 5. Those four repairs he's doing this year are in the group of 5 we put off.
I see. I thought there was only one in
No,
there.
there's only one that isn't, that's Bison.
I see.
All the other 4 are on projects we pushed off. It's one of the reasons we hesitated on those last year, because they needed repair first before we could reclaim them.
Right.
So,
Do you think Rogers Lake could go one more year? And we do those patches and those 5 areas, boom? Or do you think we
I
should?
think Rogers Lake, if we do the patches this year and the pits, or is that the repairs in the pits, isn't gonna affect our decision for next year. We still have to decide which, either the 5 or Rogers Lake comes next year.
Yeah,
But I think this money we have for Joe to fix those pits, and then we know if we've got them before we attempt to reclaim everything down there.
right. Yeah.
I don't think it affects our decision one way or the other on what to do next year.
Right, and I agree with that. I think the pits could be done. It would just be those 5 patches. Do we not bituminous them?
We've already told Joe,
And
don't
we-
bituminous.
Yeah, and then next spring, we do, those are our 5 areas, and then instead of
If we
patching them with
choose
bituminous.
to go ahead, that'll be as we planned. If we choose to not go ahead and redo everything, then we'll come
patch
back
them
and put bituminous on those,
Yeah,
those 4.
when do you think this decision should be made by?
Well, we need to make a decision this summer, so we can get going on a feasibility study.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Bryan.
I'd like to make a motion to have Joe fix what we have called the Rogers Lake and the Pits area this year based on his estimate.
I second it.
Any other discussion? The cost of hauling, removing the trees and stumps, I'm not sure why that's a question. I would assume Joe's hauling those back to the public works yard again, but if you could clarify that. But right now, we're at 44,100 on his estimate. Understanding this is just an estimate based on past experience. He's looking at 24 wide, 50 long, and 20 deep. That's pretty deep. If it's less than that, great. If it's more than that, challenge.
Right.
So, good motion and a second, any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Bryan?
when we, I think it was last year we brought this up, talking about fixing the pits, and we were talking, I mean, just a rough guess, Joe was going, yeah, it'd be about 50-ish, so I think we're in the ballpark. But yeah, the fact is, until we actually get in there, we're not going, there might be other things coming up, and then I think if the project gets out of hand, Joe and Lori certainly would be aware of that, so we can, see, reverse direction or change course if need be, so.
Excavator seemed a little shallow on 2,000, but you can confirm that. Lori, do you have any questions on what we just went through here? All right, so all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
if there isn't, if there are no new items to be introduced, I move to adjourn.
I second.
Meeting is adjourned. Apologize for that, dragging that little bit out in the end there, but I figured before we got too far down the road, we should at least